Now, without further delay, I would like to pass this session to our presenter for today. Dr. Ellison, over to you, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. I do hope you are all well today. I am really privileged to be able to lead another webinar for Cambridge Assessment. So I think some of you have already joined me on several of the webinars that we've been doing over the last few weeks. That's great. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Alison Borthwick, and I've been lucky enough to be a freelance consultant with Cambridge since 2011. And I've been lucky enough to support, I think it's about 22 countries to date. So really, really lovely to be here today. I am currently zooming in from a very wet and rainy England. And I keep pointing there because I've got a big window there and I keep looking to see if the rain has stopped yet, but it hasn't stopped at the moment. But maybe by the end of the webinar it will have. So really lovely to be here. Thank you very much to those of you who have already entered your name and your location into the chat box. I can see that you are already experienced Zoomers. If you haven't yet had a chance to say hello to the group, please do so. We're quite a large group today, but that's great. So it really does help just to have that connection, just to be able to see who's there, and really interesting to see where people are zooming in from as well. But I now want to start also by kind of doing an icebreaker, and I'm going to ask you to write into the chat box one word that describes the last few days that we've all been having, and then another word that describes what the next few days are looking like. So while you're having a little think about that, the word that describes the last few days for me is family. Because actually I've moved locations and I'm actually visiting my parents, which is lovely. So I've had a lovely family few days, which has been really nice. Lovely seeing some of the words coming up. Oh, I love that: fitness, exhausting, busy, stressful, improving. Really, really nice. And also one word that's going to describe the next few days. So here's my word. I'm popping it into the chat box now. And my next word is nervous. And that's because my 16-year-old daughter is due to get her GCSE results on Thursday. So my fingers are crossed, and I think I'm more nervous than she is, but there we go. So I just think that's really lovely. Keep having a look at what people are putting into the chat box. Some really nice kind of words coming up there. And it just makes you think, oh, I wonder why, it's been hectic, or for some people, or happy, or sometimes when it says vacationing, you think, I know what you've been doing. Great. So some really nice words there. Okay. So just a nice little quick icebreaker to start off this session, because of course we're really trying to think about what the fun virtual classroom might look like. So we're going to be talking, or I'm going to be talking for about 30 minutes and hopefully give you some really good ideas and some tips of how we can really kind of create a fun virtual classroom. And then there will be an opportunity, about 20-25 minutes, for you to ask any questions and answers. So please do pop into the chat box or the Q&A box those questions that our moderators will pick up. And a really big thank you to my co-hosts today as well. It's lovely to have such experienced support. And those are the two things that we're going to hopefully explore today together. So that first one, really important about what learners perceive to be fun, because it could be very different to what we perceive to be fun. So I think it's really important to remember that creating a fun virtual classroom might look quite different to if we are thinking about working with adults as to working with our learners. And I'm sure that, we've got people in the room today who are supporting all age of learners, from primary to secondary and so on. So what is it that learners are perceiving to be fun activities? And that's whether they are in school or at home, because I'm very conscious that lots of you are currently working in schools that are still closed. So you're very much in the virtual classroom. But as we start to move through this pandemic, hopefully we can start to move to some blended models of learning, where it might be a little bit of learning at home, a bit of learning in school, to when we can then get back to whatever the new normal is, about having that face-to-face as well. So we're going to try and think about fun activities that go across the piece there. And then the second objective is thinking about how, as we can maintain that positive learning environment. And really that leads me very nicely onto my next slide, because actually, you know, we all want to create a fun virtual classroom, but it does require some ground rules. And just as you would have those ground rules for your classrooms or when your learners are learning in school, you would still need to have those ground rules. Just because we have changed environment, changed location, we still need to think about actually making sure that that classroom culture is as positive and supportive and helpful as possible. Because we could be planning the most exciting, fun, rich, engaging tasks, but if we haven't got some of those ground rules right, then that opportunity could be lost. So thinking about that, if we think about how we might perhaps start off the term. Now, I've put starting off the term, but I realise some of you are mid-term. So, you know, if you are mid-term, then just think about when would your next opportunity be to sit down, could be virtually sitting down with your learners and say, okay, so we've been, you know, using the virtual classroom for a little while. Let's all, you know, establish some rules. So let's think about what we might be doing if we were doing this face-to-face in the classroom. So we might start by, you know, going through the rules and procedures, and quite often schools have, you know, rules and procedures, which could be anything from, you know, making sure you put your hand up if you want to talk, to not running in the corridor, to not eating in the classroom, to listening to each other when people talk. You know, there's lots of, there's the academic rules as well as the social rules. But we would certainly usually start off by talking about our expectations and those rules and procedures that we put in place to maximise learning. We often talk about the importance of study and working hard, you know, perhaps, you know, depending on which year group or grades you're supporting, the importance of working towards exams or working towards teacher assessments. But quite often, you know, we're trying to give our learners a sense of accountability at the beginning. We talk to them often about working hard, the importance of working hard and what that might look like and what we expect as teachers. Sometimes we start with a test. I know certainly some of my schools will often start with a test. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why schools and teachers do it, particularly if our learners have been away for a little while. So what might we do if we are starting off the virtual term? Or, you know, this could even be next week, you know, kind of, again, as I said earlier, don't worry if you're mid-term, just replace it with wherever you are. So what might that look like? Well, I think we are certainly going to establish those expectations. And I do think if this isn't something that you haven't done previously, you could do this the next time you meet your learners. Now, what could we have in those establishing expectations? So I think the first one is that actually, if we have a synchronous session, that, you know, I would really expect attendance, and that if you can't attend the session, I need to know as your teacher why you can't, because I need to be able to put provision in place. So just because you're not in the classroom, if you don't come to school, you know, often the expectation is that parents or adults will send in a note, they will phone the school, there will be a reason why you're not in school today. And I don't think there's any difference if we've got the virtual classroom. So if you're not in my virtual classroom, why not? And also one of those expectations could be around, you know, the session today is going to be, I don't know, 20 minutes long. So I fully expect your attention for 20 minutes. So I don't expect you to be doing other things, for example, because I know that in the past people have said to me, how do we stop our learners, maybe eating while they're online, or, they're often doing other things when we're trying to have, a virtual lesson. So perhaps go back to establishing those expectations. Now, it might be that your sessions are too long and therefore learners need to do other things. So, often it's better to have a shorter session, but then, set out your expectations that I fully expect your undivided attention for 20 minutes or however long your sessions are. Checking that learners have the right tools. Now, this is both technological tools, but also other tools as well. So, of course, we want to make sure that learners have computers or laptops or Wi-Fi or maybe the apps that we're using. But we also want to make sure that they have got paper and pencils and anything else that we want them to bring. Because I don't know about you, you're sitting there, but I certainly have got my pen, I've got my paper, I'm prepared to be making notes as well as, thinking and looking into the screen as well. And I wonder whether we just need to make sure that we've established those expectations with our learners. That support structure is really interesting, really, really important. So again, in the classroom, we would be saying to our learners, if you haven't understood something, let me know. And that's exactly the same that we would be saying in the virtual classroom. So again, it could be that support structure from teacher to learners, or learners to learners, but just making sure that learners know that just because they're not there in person, that support structure is there, but it might just look a little bit differently. And then, of course, we want to really inspire them about what's going to come, coming next. So it's really important to be saying, I've had a lovely lesson with you today. I'm really excited about tomorrow, or whenever you're next seeing your learners. In fact, I'm really, really excited. Make sure you join me on time. I've got a surprise for you. It's going to be really exciting. And we might need to find different ways of saying that, because we can't tell them that the next session, is always going to be the most exciting one. But certainly just really kind of thinking about, how do I inspire them to think, oh, the session next week on mathematics or science or art and design, I'm really excited about that one. I was told to bring something. That sounds really interesting. So I think, before we can even think about the fun activities and pedagogy that we can use, we really need to make sure that we've got those expectations absolutely sorted. So what might we do? Well, of course, starting off each session, it's really important to start it off in an interesting way. So you'll already see that even before I shared the agenda and the objectives with you today, I asked you to just pop in a word that described the last few days that you'd had and the next few days that are coming. Just a way, just so that you are engaged right from the very start. And that's something I'm going to keep coming back to. The more you can engage your learners in an active way from the start and throughout your session, whether it's an online session or a face-to-face, then they're going to maintain that level of interest. And therefore, it's going to be a little bit more fun for them. So here are some icebreakers that you might want to use. And I'm sure that you've used these before as well. So you could just ask what your favourite number is. Now, I have a favourite number. It changes every day because I like it too. But so, pop in your favourite number or your favourite colour or your favourite word. It's just getting your learners to interact, to use the chat box, and just to connect with each other. And you can pick up on as many or as little of those interactions as you want. It might be that you play a short, perhaps a 30-second video clip right at the very beginning, just to pique learners' interest, just so that they're just leaning forward thinking, oh, this looks like an interesting session. It might be that you start with a little bit of physical movement, particularly if you're aware that your learners have been sitting for quite a while. You might just say to them, right, let's all stand up, let's put our arms in the air, let's turn around, let's touch our toes, let's stretch out our arms, and let's sit back down again. So just, even just breaking that up, even for, again, about 30 seconds, getting your learners to move, we know that that really helps. If we've got the physical aspects going on, that really supports the cognitive activity as well. You might want to share an interesting fact about yourself. Now, again, it's entirely up to you, and it's really up to you about how much information you give away. But we also know that learners are really interested in their teachers, and particularly if you're zooming in or having your virtual meeting from your home, you know, they're almost wanting to lean behind and see what's behind you or see what's out of your window. So it might be that you give an interesting fact about yourself, up to you. I've already told you that I'm zooming in from a very rainy England, and if I look out the window, yeah, still raining. Great. Luckily I've got my umbrella. I'm English, I don't go anywhere without it, but just little things that you might want to share. You might want to say that, you know, you're going for a walk in the afternoon and you're going to be looking for something. 2 truths and a lie. Now, some people like this idea, some people don't, so take which ones you want, but you might say, okay, I'm going to tell you 3 things, and these could be academic things, social things, it doesn't matter, but 2 of them are true and 1 of them isn't true. And in my experience, learners love playing this, because what they're doing is they're trying to kind of guess, but once they start guessing, they start using quite a good level of thinking, of reasoning, so already you're trying to engage them. It also might be word pairs. So if I give you a word, so I might say to you, if I say the word rain, what would what's a word pair, a partner that you might go with that? So you might say sun, or you might say weather, or you might say umbrella. But you can see that these little icebreakers are very short. They can be linked to the lesson or not. But they're a way of encouraging your learners to engage with you in an active way right from the start. So just as we might start off a lesson in an interesting way, it's really important to finish in an interesting way. And of course, I'm hoping that you're thinking, well, actually, you know, we do this when we're in the classroom as well, in the face-to-face classroom. So it isn't any different. It's just that the activities and examples I'm giving you are a little bit more thoughtful to the virtual or blended model situations. So how could we finish off the session in an interesting way? Well, one of my favourites is asking your learners to write a 6-word headline about what we've been doing today. And that's a really good way of looking at formative assessment as well. So it really helps you as the teacher to assimilate and understand what your learners have taken away from the session, so that you can use that formatively for your assessment for learning going forward. But it also means that you're expecting your learners to do something. Exit tickets. Now, I know that lots of you use exit tickets, so why not use them in the virtual world as well? So again, you know, you will have a list of your learners who you are expecting to be attending the session. You can address them personally. So Hannah, you know, can you tell me, you know, what 12 multiplied by 10 is? Okay, brilliant, you can go, you know, once you've got the answer. Writing an e-postcard. You might pair up your learners and say, now I want learner A to write an e-postcard to learner B. Really nice way about kind of being able to summarize what the learning has been about. And also, you know, if you're copied into these as well, it's a good writing activity. And it helps you to use some formative assessment in a creative way. One takeaway. Again, I use this quite a lot in training, and I also use it when I'm working with learners as well. Can you give me one thing that has really appealed to you today, that you're going to switch off from the lesson and think, that's my one? Could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be an activity, could be an emotion, but one takeaway is a really nice way of saying, before you go, everybody pop in the chat box your takeaway from this session. And finally, peer questions as well. Asking your, you know, pairing up and saying, I want so-and-so to ask somebody else a question about today. So again, really, really nice kind of thinking, finishing off those sessions. You also need to build that trust and that support. So again, it's trying to show your learners that you want to be there, not just because you have to be there. And it sounds like a really, really minor point to say, but, you know, sometimes, you know, and I know we do it in the classroom, we don't necessarily have our game face on. Things have happened, or we're tired, things haven't been going well. And particularly in the virtual world, it can be quite stressful making sure that we have the Wi-Fi connected. You've got your things around you, it doesn't feel quite the right way. And we don't want to be passing those feelings, those emotions onto our learners. So as soon as you've got your learners, it's like, great, oh, I'm so excited to see you today. Brilliant. Oh, look, there's Hannah joining us. Oh, I like your pink top, Hannah. Or, oh, there's Ethan. Ethan, how did it go yesterday? You know, just really kind of showing your learners that you want to be there, really excited about the session today, can't wait to share it with you. Doesn't take very much, but it really helps building up that trust and support. And again, you know, I've already kind of mentioned it, but, you know, making sure that every learner feels welcomed and supported. And that could just be something as simple as individually greeting each learner, just going, oh, hello, you know, hi, Hannah, really lovely to see you. I missed you yesterday. Hope you're feeling better today. And again, that making time for those social and academic slots. So again, it's just allowing learners to build up that trust and support. Equal participation. So really ensuring that all learners participate. Now, one of the Cambridge key pedagogical traits is making sure that we really think about active learning. So if we're trying to ensure that all learners are participating, that's really helping them to participate actively. So getting them to contribute to the chat box, or asking them to turn their microphones on and their cameras on and talk to you, or even just kind of, you know, writing things on a piece of paper, holding it up to the screen. We can get them to participate in lots of different ways, but it's really important that they participate. And of course that, you know, not all of that communication has to be verbal, as I've just mentioned, but collaborating from the start, perhaps even inviting your learners to lead a session. I mean, how interesting would that be? That would really show what they think a fun session is, possibly, don't know. But of course, you know, I think one of the things that's really occurred to me is that it's very, very easy to participate in a virtual session in a passive way. So at the moment, I'm doing all of the talking. I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things in a minute, but it's very easy for the person who's teaching or training to do the talking, to do the active learning, and it's very easy for the people on the other end to kind of slip into a passive rather than an active role. So the more that we can get that participation increased, the more we're going to hopefully involve and invite our learners to learn actively. And we know, of course, through all of the research, that that's a very powerful way of learning. So really, you know, taking that opportunity to inspire that curiosity, spark that engagement, create that suspense. And of course, you know, there are no learning objectives that say, today we're going to have a really, you know, lesson on curiosity, or there are no learning objectives that mention engagement or suspense. But of course, you know, these are part of those Cambridge learner and teacher attributes. So we know that it's really important to do that. And in case you just need a little reminder, I've popped those 5 on the screen for you as well. So the teacher attributes are exactly the same as the learner attributes. So we are trying to ensure that our learners are engaged and confident, responsible, reflective and innovative. And if we can do all of that and really put it under that umbrella of being a fun virtual classroom, then hopefully we're there. So we've set the ground rules, we've thought about some of the things that we might need to think about. So let's just have a little think about, how can we plan for fun? So the first thing we might want to do is, you know, I've already mentioned that curiosity, sparking that curiosity and creating that suspense. So we might ask some interesting questions. So one question we might ask our learners to go and explore is, how long does an ice cube take to melt? Now, we could have a short virtual session. We could talk about how our learners might go and plan that learning, how they might implement that experiment. They might have to do it over several days. Does it depend on which hand you hold it in? Does it depend on who is holding the ice cube? Does it depend on whether nobody's holding the ice cube, it's on the table? But we can talk about the types of things that they might go and do, and then we can go and invite them to do that and then feedback in whatever way we're getting them to feedback over the next couple of days. Another really interesting question is kind of saying to them, are we really as tall as our arm span? So I'm going to ask you to now, just can you all put your arms out, okay? I'm going to try and lean back so you can see. Can you see my arms? Now, I can't see you on the screen, but I'm really, really hoping that all 505 of you are doing exactly what I'm doing. Have you got your arms out? I'm going to move my chair backwards. Okay, so there's my arm span. And the one of the measurements that we know is that if we hold our arm span from this finger to this finger, that represents how tall I am. So again, it's a really nice way of being able to do that. So I'm trusting that you are all currently sitting, watching this webinar with your arms out as well. So again, we could say to our learners, well, is it true? Were you really as tall as your arm span? And how can you prove it? And if you're not, what might the reasons be? So again, just asking some interesting questions that we might not necessarily find in the textbooks, but these are really good questions. You know, we've got a science question with the ice cube, we've got a mathematical question with the arm span. So again, we can be a little bit more creative in this current situation, and we should be. What about making curious statements? I'm going to make a statement that to multiply by 10, you add a 0. That's what I'm saying. It's not a question, it's a statement. And I might say, okay, we're going to finish the session. That's my statement. When we come back next week, I want you to convince me whether that's always true, sometimes true, or never true. But that's my statement. Now, of course, when you do these kind of things, you might need to do some modelling of it first. Otherwise, your learners might come back and say, yes, it's true, or no, it's not true. And you think, well, can you tell me why? So again, some modelling going on there. What about the other one? Not all sentences need a capital letter or full stop. That's my statement. It's not a question. That's the statement I'm making today. So you can see that sometimes I make statements that are true. Sometimes I make statements that are partially true. And sometimes I make statements that are not true at all. But I'm going to let you figure out which of those two statements you think fit into that box. Pop it into the chat box if you want to. But just kind of thinking about that curiosity, sparking that curiosity is going to be one way of setting up our fun virtual classroom. So thinking about setting unusual tasks. So I've got a few suggestions for you here. So here are a few, and you will be able to take these and adapt them in lots of different ways. So it might be that I ask, which number have you used the most in the last week? So I'm going to give you a moment, have a little think, pop it into the chat box, and I'm going to share the number that I've been using in the last few days as well. Okay, oh, we've got some 9s, 18s, 11s. It's lovely to actually, oh goodness me, 1,850. Wow, 25, 17, got some 7s, 50. Oh, I think I saw a decimal there. Wow, the chat box is just going, vroom, it's great. Oh, have we got any fractions coming in? I don't know whether I've seen a fraction yet. No, you don't have to put one in, it's only in case. Just really, really interesting. Oh my goodness, that's a very long number. I saw lots of zeros on that one. Brilliant. So again, we can either just be doing this because it's a bit of an unusual task, and then we might get our learners to do something with those numbers, or you might select a few of those numbers to then, you know, perhaps I'm doing a mathematics lesson, so I'm actually getting the learners to generate the numbers that they're going to be using for some mathematics. So again, it's trying to involve the learners just a little bit more than perhaps we would normally, maybe. Okay, so I promised I would share the number I've been using over the last few days, number 39. And again, I've already mentioned that for me, on Thursday, my daughter receives her GCSE results, and she needs 39 points to go on to do her A-levels. So at the moment, it's all about the number 39. We're very confident she'll get 39. You know, I think she maybe thinks that, I don't know what she thinks. There we go. Okay, so that's the first unusual task. Second one, what science have you engaged in recently? So again, have a little think over the last couple of days. Have you engaged in any science? Again, I'll give you literally 20 seconds to put anything into the chat box, and then I'll share with you the science that I have been engaged with. Okay, oh, we've got some physics and biology. Starving myself, oh no. Colour mixing. Isn't it interesting? I mean, just look at all of those things. How interesting that we've all been doing such a lot of science, and yet we haven't been in school necessarily, or not all of us have. So again, it really shows us that we can be using some of the home situations to really inspire and kind of, you know, show learners that we have got those connections. Okay, so cat's eyes, gravity. Gosh, this is just brilliant. Yeah, absolutely fantastic group. So what have I been looking at? Probably no surprise, because I live in the UK. I'm obsessed with the sun and whether it's raining or not. But we've been noticing that as we get further towards the end of our summer in the UK, the sun is much lower, and so I've been noticing when we've been outside that we have more shadows. The sun's lower. I'm not expecting the shadows to be where they were last week, and that's been a really, really interesting conversation that actually I've been having with my husband and daughter about, oh look, you know, the sun's now behind that tree, so we know that we're coming towards the end of August. So we've been doing some science as well. Okay, again, setting up these unusual tasks really just helps learners to realise that a lot of the learning they're doing, they are learning all the time. It just doesn't necessarily have to be from the textbook. Third unusual task, you might ask them to bring and possibly show, but bring an object that they want to talk about. Now, I've done this quite a few times, and it is great to see the types of objects that learners bring. So I'm not going to ask you to share because we'd have to put on the cameras and probably the whole webinar would crash. But I have brought an unusual object that I would like to share with you today. So can you see what I'm showing you? Put into the chat box if you can see, or you think you can, you know what I'm showing. Oh yes, somebody's got it. Somebody's actually put, is it a Rubik's Cube? It is, but it's a special type of Rubik's Cube. First of all, it's gold, and anybody that knows me, they do know that I do like gold. I do like a bit of glitter. So it's a gold and a different covered Rubik's Cube, and you can see that I've attempted to unravel it, and I currently haven't yet managed to put it back together. So that's kind of that's been my lockdown or my circuit breaker challenge, to try and actually fix my Rubik's Cube. And it might be that I'm just asking my learners to bring an object just because I want them to participate in an active way. I'm just interested to see what they bring. I then might be able to use the objects in some planning and some teaching that I'm doing that's coming up. Because you don't know what they're going to bring, it could be anything, and I think that's really lovely. But from your learner's point of view, remember we've talked about the importance of that participation and really getting your learners kind of feeling as though they are accountable as well. And I think, you know, they do love sharing these. Now, depending on how many learners you have in your virtual classroom, you can just ask 1 or 2 learners to share it each time. But it's just a really nice way, again, of engaging your learners. And it's we probably wouldn't find that activity anywhere in the textbooks, but I bet we can put lots and lots and lots of learning objectives. So I could be doing something that's based on mathematics, problem solving, but I could be doing different shapes that we can see. We could be talking about 2D shapes and 3D shapes. We could just be talking about resilience and perseverance. Have I got it? Why haven't I completed it? There's lots and lots of things, and I will be able to find objectives in lots of the schemes of work that I would be able to draw on just from being able to share a Rubik's Cube. Okay, let's keep on going. Fourth unusual task. I really like the idea of using paintings and pictures. I think the more that we are using the virtual or the blended models of learning, you know, we don't have to have screens full of lots of different words. So I'm going to share this one with you. It's a little bit blurry, apologies for that. And I'm going to use a technique that we use in a lot of Cambridge training that I also use with children and learners. And it actually comes from Harvard University, and it's their Project Zero, and it's the See, Think, Wonder task. So when you look at that painting, what can you see? Can you just type into the chat box, what is it you can see in that painting? So don't think about anything, but people are saying that they can see penguins. Yeah, I agree. I can see penguins. Somebody said they can see penguins walking. I think you're thinking that they're walking, but certainly see penguins. We can see water. Family of penguins. Don't know if it's a family you're thinking. Sunny day. I think we can. I don't know whether we can see that it's a sunny day. We could maybe think that it's a sunny day because we can see the shadows, we can see some rocks, we can see a beach. So again, you can really kind of see that seeing is getting you to notice details. Okay, what about thinking? I'm going to move it on now. So we've done the seeing bit. What are you thinking about this painting, this picture? What does it make you think? What does it make you ask? What do you want to know more of? So it makes you think about a holiday. Maybe the penguins are on holiday. It makes you think about their vacation, all pollution free. So you're thinking that actually you can't see any rubbish or any pollution. So that's really nice. Thinking about togetherness. I just want to have this group forever, I think. These are such lovely comments. So again, we've done the seeing part, which is just noticing details, just observing. The thinking part is really getting you to maybe ask some questions. So here's the big one. What do you wonder? What are you wondering when you look at that? Oh, wondering about ice caps. Yeah, maybe if I expanded the painting, maybe there's an ice cap just out of shot, which would be really bizarre, wouldn't it? Oh, I love that. Why are the penguins there? I always wonder that one. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to have a look at a couple more. These are great. I wonder what if the penguins are searching for ice. I wonder if they're waiting for, when do I visit this place? I am totally with you there. Yes. How did the penguins get to a sunny place? Really interesting. What are they looking at? I love that one. What are those? They all do look like they're looking at something. So again, you can see that by using a painting or a picture and using one of the thinking routines like See, Think, Wonder from Harvard, look at the amount of talk and thinking and reasoning that's generated. So again, hopefully you're thinking, oh, that was, you know, these tasks, they're quite fun, they're engaging. It's because they're engaging, it's because they're a little bit unusual that's hopefully making them have that fun element as well. Using videos, again, really, really good. If we can break up our sessions with a video, that's really, really powerful. Now, I'm not going to share with you some videos today, just because I'm ever so slightly worried that we would crash the internet, the worldwide internet. However, I have put up 3 of my favorite videos. So How Big is a Million? This is a clip of some children in the UK that are really trying to figure out what a million looks like, and they do get there. An iceberg melting. You know, try and use videos that maybe the learners, you know, they're not going to be able to potentially watch an iceberg melting. And that video is amazing. And I do keep thinking, oh my goodness, those people that managed to film that in the boat, you know, how amazing and yet how scary. And then I love the one, The Mindset of a Champion. And this is of a little boy who's actually doing a TED talk all about, his growth mindset. So videos, I can see that people are putting in the chat box. It's really lovely to use videos. They don't have to be very long, but again, we're trying to just think about different things that we can include in our virtual or blended learning classroom. And finally, thinking about different mediums for our learners to work in. So it's quite easy, as I said earlier, for the teacher to do the talking, the learners to do the listening, sometimes passively, and then perhaps we still get them to respond in the same way. Well, actually, let's use some different mediums, because that in itself makes it more interesting. So I've talked about 6-word headlines, maybe using photographs, maybe using pictures, writing e-postcards, using knowledge organisers. I love kind of, saying to the learners, we're going to be learning something over the next few weeks on, I don't know, fractions. So can you do a mind map of everything that you know about fractions? And then we're going to repeat it in a few weeks' time, and we're going to add to it and maybe then organise that knowledge a little bit more. But also perhaps building a model as well. Just before we entered into COVID, I was doing lots of sessions, face-to-face sessions, through using Lego. It's kind of one of those things that I'd forgotten how much I loved using Lego. So I've been trying to use Lego in lots of different situations for every subject. So again, it might be that you say to your learners, can you build me a model of the story that you're going to write? Or how you were feeling about the maths, or can you kind of build a model about the science that you were doing? And of course, it doesn't have to be from Lego, it could be from anything that they have around them. But again, it's something that you think, we probably wouldn't do that necessarily in the classroom. We've got the time, we've potentially got the tools to do that in the online or virtual way. So again, it's just thinking a little bit differently. And it might be that, your learners don't have materials, but it could be that they might be able to stack some books, and that could be a model of representing something. It could be that they could use some newspaper or some kind of cereal boxes, that type of thing. So I think there are ways around it if we can think a little bit creatively. And there is one of those models that I was talking about. So I'd put some things on the table, and this was I'd asked the teachers to, we were talking about mindset and growth mindset, and they built this model to really show how, first of all, the learner, that's a learner on the table, arms up in the air, like, success, I'm really successful, happy face. But then that building, they kept building their knowledge, and sometimes it was big knowledge, as in the blue Lego piece, and sometimes it was little, and so on. And I can see that people are saying, how can I use Lego in science? I haven't got time to say today, but I promise you can. Okay, the power of learner voice, I'm almost there. So it occurs to me also that if we as teachers, as adults, are trying to think about what makes a virtual, fun classroom, we should ask our learners. And it is something that I've been saying on lots of webinars. Audit what your learners have, audit what your learners would like to do. So I thought I will, follow what I've been saying. So I said to my 16-year-old daughter, if you had to design your lesson, or when you were at school, which lessons did you really, really enjoy, and what was it about them? And that's what she said. And it really surprised me. I didn't think she would say these things. So she said, well, I really like it when the learning has a bit of like a competition element to it. She said, I don't necessarily want to hand in my results, but I like it when there's a competitive element. I was like, really? I would not have said that about her. And yet she said, yeah, no, I really like that. Okay. She said, I really like it when I get to work with somebody else of her choice. She said, I don't like it when the teachers put us together, but she said, if I get to choose who I work with, then I really like that. She said, because I feel that I'm trusted. She said, 2 heads are better than 1, and again, I thought, do we do that enough in the virtual or the blended learning model? I don't know. And she said, I really like it when I have to think, she said, but not too hard, which made me laugh. But again, ask your learners what they think. And of course, remember that, we need to tell them that they are doing really well. The power of success is just, that is, we know success breeds success. So tell your learners that they've worked really hard, that you're delighted that they attended the session, that you've got some really fun things coming up. So finally, I have one more thing to ask you while you think about some questions. What are you going to take away from this webinar? So let's do that one takeaway. If there's something that when we switch off the webinar, not yet, but in 15, 20 minutes time, what are you going to kind of think, oh, that's really made me think about something? Doesn't have to be something new. Also, people are saying painting, using pictures. So what is going to be your one takeaway from this webinar? How are you going to really make your next virtual learning sessions fun? So I'm going to pause there while you pop in the chat box and lovely things coming up. Pictures, objects, e-tickets, unusual tasks, see, think, wonder. Yeah, great, lovely, really, really nice tasks. Okay, so keep on just popping those in, but I'm going to just kind of move over to the next slide and just say thank you ever so much. I hope you were all doing the arm span, and I will now pause and hand over to my fantastic moderators, and I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for such an interesting presentation. So we are now going to take questions. It looks like we have already a few questions. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can still submit your questions through the Q&A box. All right, so the first question is from Beth, and the question is, how do we ask parents to let the child do their activity individually as being virtual? The young kids need to be assisted by their parents.
Yes, that's a question that we get asked quite a lot. I think there's two things really to think about. First of all, parents are at home. Most of our parents are desperate to support. So in a way, let's encourage them to support. In the classroom, we're very much about independent learning, and we wouldn't necessarily over scaffold, but we have a really unique situation here where our learners are completing work at home, and actually, why not ask them to help the learners? It's not cheating. I think we have to remember that if we're being supported with our learning, that it's not that they're cheating, that our learners will still be learning. So actually, I think I keep changing my mind. I think I really want the parents to support and collaborate with their learners. This is a one-time opportunity that they're going to get to do this, and they want the best for their learners, so they are doing kind of the thing that they think is the most helpful. The other thing I would say is that we need to really support our learners, our parents, and really help them to know what it is that we want them to do. So if we send work home but we don't give our parents any instructions, kind of in a way, that's our fault for not helping them. So if you really, really don't want your parents to help your learners, then actually write them, a little bit of communication. So I've mentioned this on a few webinars now, so apologies if you've already heard me say this before, but I saw a really lovely presentation that one of my teachers had written. And it was actually for 5 and 6 year olds, and it was all about exploring pattern, mathematical pattern, and patterns all around the home and the environment. And on the slides, she'd written the slides for the learners to follow, but right at the beginning, she'd put on a slide and she'd said, this slide is just for the grown-ups. And I thought that was lovely. So she was saying to the parents, look, this is what I would really, really like your learners to do. And it would be really helpful if you could do this and ask maybe this question. And it would be really good if you could, let them go off and explore. And then when they've had time to explore on their own, perhaps you could ask them this particular question. So what that particular teacher was doing was that she was training her parents to support their learners, but in the way she wanted them to. So I think we have to be really careful. our parents want to support. And I've mentioned I've got a 16-year-old. I was desperate to support my daughter. She didn't want me to support, but I wanted to support her because I thought that was my job. So I think our parents are only doing what they feel is their job. So actually, let's help them to do that. So I don't know if that's the answer that you were thinking, but yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Alison. Okay, I think this is the most question that given from Yasmin. How can we encourage learners to have their cameras on, as to be seen and heard is equally important in an online session?
So I think, yeah, absolutely. So I think it goes back to setting those ground rules and those expectations. So certainly if your learners are switching off their cameras, it's really important to find out why. Is it because their internet is buffering? Perhaps they haven't got strong enough broadband. So I think that's the first thing. Find out if their cameras are not on, find out why. Secondly, if they are able to have their cameras on, but they're choosing not to, then actually it's almost like, if you're in the classroom, they're turning their chair away from you, and we wouldn't allow that. So actually it's about going back and setting up those ground rules, but also saying that while I expect your camera to be on, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to ask you to contribute, because maybe the camera isn't on because they are afraid of having to talk, but also maybe their camera isn't on because they're not listening necessarily. So I think I would want to find out why, but I'd also want to set up my virtual classroom ground rules that say, I do expect your camera to be on. If it isn't, email me, let's have a conversation about why. But I agree that, it might be that it's an internet capacity, in which case we can't do anything about that.
Thank you, Alison. Okay, so the next question is, some parents feel fun activities is not learning. They believe in paper pencil workbook activities. What should we do?
We need to help them to understand that actually learning is fun. And remember that, a lot of parents are going back to, they're drawing on experiences that they had at school, and education and school is very, very different. It moves really, really quickly. So again, I think it's about that communication and about really, perhaps doing some of the growth mindset research with your parents to say that actually, the more fun that we can have with our learners while they're learning, actually what that means is that they're more willing to try things, that we're developing their resilience and perseverance, and that learning isn't necessarily about paper and pencil. Learning can be through the medium of photos or pictures, and perhaps helping them. So it might be that you have, I don't know whether anybody has had a session where they just have a session for parents, a little bit like doing a virtual parents evening or a virtual parents afternoon, and just saying to parents, it might, you're seeing lots of things because your learners are with you at the moment, for lots of you 24/7. However, learning, I can guarantee that your learners are learning. All of my sessions will have learning objectives, so you can see what they're learning, you can see the success criteria. However, it doesn't have to be pencil and paper. And maybe share with them the Cambridge learner attributes, because those learner attributes don't say, actually it's about getting the right answers, or it's about, writing things down. They talk about learners being confident. They talk about learners being innovative. So if we want that, and of course we do, because we're talking about 21st, 22nd century skills that our learners need, then the activities that our learners do need to be different to the ones that potentially parents were doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think we need to communicate with our parents and just, share with them those things.
Thank you, Alison. We have another question from Nanjana. I'm able to give fun activities, but how can I make the learners also grasp the concept and write at the same time?
I think, all of the activities that I've been sharing with you today would always have learning objectives and success criteria against them. So I think that's the first thing. So that grasping the concept is about saying, today we are going to learn whatever it is. Today we are going to learn, I don't know, about, adding, multiplying by 10, by 100, by powers of 10, etc. So your learning objectives are still there, and you still have your success criteria. But the way that you employ your pedagogy, the tasks that you choose, that can be where the fun element comes in. And also, a big part of what we've been doing today is that collaboration and that active learning. So again, the more that you are involved, the more that you're actively learning, that you're actively thinking, that you're using the chat box, for example, that's kind of that's a pedagogical tool that I was using today to kind of model that. But that's sometimes, so the fun elements can be through pedagogy or activities or collaboration, for example. Writing at the same time, I don't know whether we do have to get our learners to write everything down. I think we are, I think we've been of that mindset that they have to write everything down, but I don't know whether they do. So what I would really ask you to think about is, what is it that you do want your learners to record over the space of a few lessons, or a week or 2 weeks? But they don't have to write everything down. Learning doesn't happen because you write something down. Learning can happen because you're doing some really good thinking or some really good talking. So, we haven't talked today about, using mobile phones or laptops or technology to record a 30-second video about what you're thinking. So I think I would encourage you to think about employing different pedagogical techniques and different activities. But I'm very much of the opinion that the objectives and success criteria would still be there.
Thanks, Alison. Okay, the next question is, our online classes are 30 minutes. How can we engage all 20 students during each session?
So I'm interested to know how old those students are. I think 30 minutes is quite a long time. So the first thing I would be doing, depending on the age of the students, is that I would have a mixture of social and academic activities in there. So that it might be that I'm starting off with an icebreaker that's potentially a social icebreaker. So what's your favourite word, or what have you been doing over the last few days? I would certainly maybe have a little mini break in that 30 minutes, because 30 minutes learning online is actually more intense than 30 minutes learning in the classroom. So I think we do need to be mindful that it's not exactly the same situation that we're in. So I would certainly have an introduction, an icebreaker. Maybe after 10 or 15 minutes, I might have a little mini break, maybe 30 seconds or a minute. We might do some physical activity there, or we might just pause and have something else that would be a little social interlude, for example. But certainly, if you've got 20 students, use some of the techniques that I've been using today. So have a think about, during the 30-minute presentation that I did with you, how many times did I ask you to enter into the chat box? So I think, we did quite a few times. We did the icebreaker, we did the arm span. When I was doing the unusual tasks, you put in your favorite number, you put in the science. So again, it's that engagement. The more that you can, even just use things like the chat box, or, get a piece of paper, hold it up to the screen, that type of thing. That's how I would be engaging students. So I think you can do it. 30 minutes is quite a long time if you're learning passively. So if you'd been listening for 30 minutes without me asking you to do anything in terms of the chat box, you can't maintain concentration for that long. You would at some point have looked out the window, or I don't know, maybe you did get up and make a coffee or something. So I think, be really mindful that 30 minutes of passively learning is too long. 30 minutes of actively learning is probably okay.
Thank you very much, Erin. Well, I think that's the last question. We are sorry we cannot facilitate all the questions from in the Q&A box. And then over to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Audrey and Alison. Thanks for answering those questions, Alison. Okay, just one last point before we leave. A web browser with the feedback form will pop up on your screen as you leave the session. So we would really appreciate it if you can take 2 minutes to complete the feedback form. It would certainly help us to improve our future webinars. Thank you once again, Alison, for the great presentation, and thank you to all attendees for taking time to join us today. We hope to see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.